It's been over a year since Laporta was elected president. How do you rate his work so far? Has he been posting too much social media, speeches, and not doing enough, or is he slowly but steadily balancing the books?
That I was actually I've spent the last like few days kind of contemplating this, just independent of anything.
Right.
Um, I mean, he's done a lot of. So the biggest decision was obviously taken out of his hands, the Messi thing, and then beyond that, he's done a lot of the difficult, a lot of the difficult stuff that had to be done. I mean, simply just to keep the whole operation afloat and register new players and things like that. Mid-season, he was able to get, uh, I mean, primarily Aubameyang, but he was able to get contributors to help the club really sort of, maintain the momentum that they were starting to build under Xavi. And all in all, for as much as everything kind of ended results-wise suboptimally, I mean, it was second place, and we're in the Champions League and all of that. So, I mean, in that sense, I think it's been good. I do think that broadly speaking, I do think he talks too much, and I feel like every week, and I understand that there's an objective here, particularly with a club that's in dire financial straits and things like that. You have to, by carrot or stick, somehow get guys who are good players to play for less than the prevailing market rate. And I've grown a little bit tired of the seemingly unending appeals for young players or players in their primes, or just premium quality players being, I don't know if shamed is the right word, but essentially the whole notion of how dare you not be willing to play for us for free and for the honor of wearing the shirt. I mean, I understand it's a prestigious club. It's a proud institution. It's one of the great institutions in the sport. But if you're a guy who's like 23 and your career is, maybe going to be, 10 years if you're pretty lucky. It's just, I've grown a little bit weary of him just repeatedly pounding the table for people to sacrifice their prime earning years in the name of the institution.
Well, I think when it comes to the things he's saying and overtly saying, I wonder what is useful for the next assembly. We'll get to that in a second. Mm-hmm. What is useful for his own individual political gain? What is posturing for agents and for sponsors and things like that? Because really, as a figurehead and the president of Barcelona, that's what you're doing. You are the guy, the last man to make those handshakes. And I think the criticism that I've heard from most fans, I think the ones who are really, really frustrated with Laporta are more frustrated that he keeps giving false hope. And that is really what a politician can do to get to upset people. So he gave false hope about keeping Messi. There was that hope for signing Haaland. There was hope for even now there's hope for signing Lewandowski, and people really haven't jumped ship on that, even if it is impossible. So because Laporta keeps kind of giving false hope to certain things, again, even if they do sign Lewandowski, then he got one of the three right in that instance. But so many times, I think Laporta has put himself in a difficult spot where, because he wants to remain in a position of power, not just as president, I just mean at the bargaining table with these sponsorship deals, he cannot transparently say we were never going to be able to afford Messi, and we knew that for more than a few weeks, right? So it's almost like you have to lie to both those who are trying to take advantage of you outside the club, but that means you also have to lie to your supporters and your socios and
the constituency too.
Exactly. So you kind of have to do both to keep yourself in a good position there. So because he did, I mean, he wound up being the president, and I have to ask this question too, where we said it about Font on the last listener question show, that whether it was Font or anybody, right, whether it was Bartomeu's candidate, whether it was one of the other outside candidates, if you're the president of FC Barcelona and you're the one that lost Messi on a free, even though you were able to get rid of Coutinho and Griezmann, you also likely lose Dembele on a free. And at this point in time, I will say it is 60-40 that he loses Frankie de Jong. I think that's where we're at, just with the understanding of the finances right now. And then the other questions are, who is he surrounded himself with? And by and large, as you said, we give him credit for the people he surrounded himself with, including Matteo Alemany, and Raphael Just and Jordi Cruyff. And then even though the CEO, Ferran Rivera, resigned, it was replaced by Oscar Grau, who is a long time champion of FC Barcelona, if you will. Or
he's been in the orbit for a long time.
Been decades and decades, right? And then we're going to have to see, I think, the long term about where Laporta, because again, so much of his legacy is not going to matter as much as he would love it to matter on the field. His legacy his second legacy is truly going to matter off the field. I mean, the Spotify deal, even reportedly 70 million for stadium naming rights and all the jersey brand on the men's, women's, and training kits. This deal would have been more than 80 million prior to the pandemic. That was the going rate for that. When you combine exposure, you combine the, I guess, the deal just up front and the marketing opportunities, if you will, between Spotify and Barcelona for those fans. But a reminder that the pandemic did put many clubs in a difficult financial situation where they have lost some of their negotiating power. So you're 70 million there. And then the big one here is that assembly that's coming up in 3 days' time. As I said, politicians will get the credit for the success that they may not largely deserve, and they will get the blame for things out of their control. And right now, Laporta is trying to put some pressure on socios for that upcoming assembly, saying that the club could get much closer to balancing the books and improving the salary limit if the 49% of licensing and merchandising is sold and 25% of the TV rights are sold as well. And this is actually a sentiment that Tebas, believe it or not, Tebas did actually back up today, which if those two agree on anything, that being Laporta and Tebas, you go, maybe there's truth to that if they're both agreeing on one thing. But just to round it out before I throw it back to you, Emile, so the agenda is the president is going to try to give his best pitch, and then they're going to do the vote on the BLM rights, and then they're going to do the vote on 25% of the income from television rights. And then it's an open session for the socios to really ask those questions. And I think you're going to see a lot of, I think while both of those may pass, you're going to see a lot of objection as well in that open session, which does make sense, right? You don't object if you're going to vote yes, or you're going to agree with it. You're only going to hear from those who dissent.
Totally. And now, so there's a lot to unpack there. So I think, so broadly speaking, I agree with you in terms of who he's messaged for and why he has to do this. I mean, it's, there's a whole point. I mean, clubs of a certain size, even in the worst of times, there's this unrelenting pressure to always carry yourself as a mega club, even when sort of it's plain for everyone to see that you're not in that place. So I get that. And I also understand that, things have to be done to, balance the books, or at least make tangible progress towards balancing the books. And I mean, unfortunately, I've kind of reconciled in my head that Frankie de Jong might just be or likely will be, I don't know, collateral damage, or just kind of the cost of doing that business. Because ultimately, I mean, if you're going to dig yourself out of this hole, you have to conjure up things that people want to give you money for, and, it'd be nice, because every so often, whether it's here or whether it's online, you see stuff that, Barcelona eager to unload Samuel Umtiti. And my whole thing is like, well, yeah, no kidding. But, is there anyone who's willing to, unload him? And the answer is always no. So, I mean, all of this actually makes sense. Now, the BLM and the TV revenue thing, and if I'm not mistaken, it's 25% of TV revenue. That's in perpetuity, right?
Well, we're not exactly sure where the deal is. It depends on, I mean, I've heard a lot of different things. I've heard that it's the renegotiation of their own CVC deal. I've heard that it's also just to someone else, like not necessarily Saks, but that it's 25% of that income to somebody else, which would be, is it 50 years? Is it 30 years? I mean, that negotiation might be behind closed doors that we don't know about. So the only caveat I'm adding is, even though you think you might know exact details of what that means, I'm not even sure if we potentially know the partner.
Right. And so, I mean, okay, but even without knowing the details or the partner, 45% of, licensing and merchandising and 25% of TV revenue, like if we say in perpetuity, or, I mean, I guess when you sell 49%, that is in perpetuity. Someone else owns it unless you buy it back from them.
Right.
I think I don't like it. I mean, I realize you keep majority interest, and so you ultimately still do get to call the shots of things like that. But I feel like this really is kind of, pawning the family jewels to bridge your short-term financial needs rather than ever actually doing I feel like there's an element of the hard work financially that didn't get done. It was kind of, the hard work got done, Messi got moved and things like that and everything. But then it was the first instant that it was possible. They spent $55 million to bring in Ferran Torres. And then every other subsequent conversation has been, how do we somehow conjure up, the financial gymnastics to bring in Lewandowski or, whomever. And I feel like all of this it's a frustrating kind of repetition of, we want to do enough of the work to sort of bridge this next gap, but without actually solidifying the foundation. If that makes any sense. I mean, we're in for lean years, whether we want to say it or not, whether we're kind of, I'm always reminded of, there's a line in The Wire where, they're kind of talking about just the code of the street. And like, I understand we have to fight on the lie that, that all is okay, or that we are just a stone's throw away from rejoining the likes of Man City and Liverpool and, whomever. But I mean, I think we have to also, I mean, we are in lean years. I mean, I think everyone who's having an honest assessment, who makes an honest assessment of the club knows that.
Well, I think it's from a public relations standpoint, from a representation of your club to a global audience, with FC Barcelona coming to the US over the summer and all the different work they're doing in the Far East, Barcelona and Laporta is, I think, fairly continuing to try to tell people and explain to people that they are still a world power in world football, because there is a timeline, and there are many timelines, and there are many paths that Barca could go down in the next 2 or 3 years where they take a step back that they don't come back from. The way that football is changing hands, the way that money in football is changing hands, Barcelona can fall behind because, again, we talked about it last week, that Spain and the Liga, they in themselves have an opportunity to fall behind and not be able to catch up unless you are Real Madrid. So Rose does ask, is there any way for Barcelona to pay back all of its debt, or is the reality in living in some sort of debt forever? Well, I do implore him to go back and talk to or listen to episode 358 from 2 weeks ago. We talked about that, being Levon and I, about the short-term debt of the club being the real pressing danger and the issue that continues to restrict the salary limit, because the club is really banking on that S by Barca project, the expansion and the renovating of the stadium, to pay off a lot of the long-term debt, because that in itself is a loan of 1.5 billion. So really the next 15, 20 years is about getting back to the top, staying on top, and trying to put 100,000 people in that stadium week after week and getting gate revenue, the likes of no other club in world football can compete with. And that way, they don't have to worry about some gigantic benefactor like a Man City. And actually, let me even take that one step further and say, then they don't have to worry about selling big stakes of their own club. And they don't actually have to be owned by someone else who has just this ever limitless amount of money. And that is what Barcelona is trying to do. So it really, this financially, whether we want to admit it or not, is still a fight for the soul of the club. And those are the kind of high stakes that Laporta is dealing with. And as I said, there is, who knows what, again, we know what financial debt Barcelona has, but who knows how likely it is that Barcelona can have their soul saved. Like, how is he doing everything he could have? Is he doing everything another president could have done? And so I guess I'm putting a pin. I'm finally ending, that Laporta question again, in that how Laporta deals with the short-term debt is unfortunately how people will remember his legacy. Truly, the second version of his presidency should be defined by the long term and how he navigated this financial crisis, if you will.